I'm really being a jerk here. Because nobody can have 100% of the answer to everything. So let me think about this for a second. And it's a very interesting, I've used these dialogue questions myself in different types of forums, and they're profound. But there are a series of others, and you can design them for purposes, whatever purposes it is that you have in mind. So for example, for our evening, we began with a very simple question, which is just, what is your connection to the Middle East? Do you have one? Why are you here tonight? What drew you to come here? And now everybody is presenting themselves, what their background, their experience is, Israeli, Palestinian, whatever. And then there are a series of other questions to lead more deeply into engagement. What we're interested in is not the answers, but the engagement, the connections, the listening, the willingness to entertain, the presentation of the answer as not absolute, but certainly in a mathematical sense, not proven, but as a contribution to a higher truth that emerges when these multiple truths come together. And we ended with two questions. One question was, if you were to do this film all over again, having seen the one that you just watched, what would you do differently and why? And the last question is, what can we here ourselves do in order to try to do something about this problem? What can we do in our communities? And those are the ones that we wrote down, and the facilitators and the recorders for each group reported out. And so we got incredible ideas. Here's one of the simple ones. Let's each of us have a dinner in which we invite people from each of the different sides. I worked training FEMA workers in Los Angeles after the what were known as the Rodney King riots. Do you remember those? And they were going into different neighborhoods, African American, Latino, Asian, white neighborhoods, and having conversations with people about race and prejudice. And I trained all of those people to do this type of work. And this was one of the things that they set up, which is, okay, you're from an Asian community. Do you know anybody from the Latino community or the African American community? Would you be willing to invite, in other words, representatives, people, individual people to your house for dinner from these different cultures? Ask them to bring food from their culture, poetry, song, artifacts, whatever they want to bring, and just talk about what your differences are in a context that makes it clear that those are beautiful things. Those are things that should be valued and treasured, that all of us can learn from. So, what about Mediators Beyond Borders? How does this connect with all of this? On the tiniest imaginable scale, what we are trying to do is to simply touch individual human beings and encourage them to see themselves as people who could make a difference in the Buddha Durham refugee camp, to a small group of villagers in Nepal, to the people who Nan and I just went down to visit in Biloxi, Mississippi, and New Orleans, who were victims of Katrina. And in the session that Nan led in New Orleans, present were people who were Rastafarians, street people, people who may have been homeless, but had come to this community mediation center wanting to volunteer. Most of you in this room could go down there and do something. And I'm not telling you to go or to do something, but what I'm suggesting is to look into yourself and to say, is there something that I could do that might be able to make a difference? What makes a difference? The answer is all of us doing things together in a coordinated way. There's a famous question that was once asked of Lenin during the Russian Revolution. He was asked, a group of peasants came to see him, and and said, what do we do about the czar? And he said famously that, if each of you individually throw a rock at the czar, nothing's going to happen. But if you calculate it and all throw your rocks at the same time, that will make a difference. Well, the same thing is true here. If all of us work together in a coordinated way, in a strategic way, to try to do something, hopefully we will be able to do something. And what is the something that we'll be able to do? First, I think we will be able to change ourselves a little bit into people who are conscious of our connection with other cultures and other places around the world, no matter how distant. Second, I think we will actually be able to make a difference in the lives of individual human beings. The thing that I would say have learned from this work that I have done is what an incredible impact it is possible to have if you approach this in the right way. Approaching it in the right way means with genuine humility. It means recognizing that they have something to teach us as well as we have something to teach them. It means not coming in like the typical North Americans and saying, scrap whatever it is that you're doing, we have the answer. So you're going to do it from now on our way. And it means not just coming in on a one-time basis, but coming back and back and back and back over a period of years where you will be able to have an impact. I've done this in a couple of different countries. In one, I worked for 17 years, going back twice a year, every year, for 17 years. And over that period of time, of course, you can watch the conflicts change dramatically, and the expertise change, and the needs change, and the relationships change. But what happens over that period of time is that you begin building a culture of conflict resolution. And that is our goal, not to rule the planet, but to, in fact, make it possible for the people on this planet to rule themselves, to be stronger than their conflicts, to have something that they feel that they can do in the midst of the worst kinds of crises. Here's another way of thinking of it. What happens after a war? You can look at any war anywhere. And the answer is people come along who have to sweep up and clean up the mess. And what are the skills that those people require? Well, obviously they require some resources like money and food and clothing and shelter and things of this sort. But if you begin to think about what are the skills that indigenous people require within those communities in order to be able to recover from what happened to them, some of those skills have to do with Truth and Reconciliation Commission types of questions and dialogues. They have to do with the ability now to look at your neighbor who is on the other side of this, to look at this child soldier who raped your cousin, or whatever it might happen to have been, and find some way of reintegrating and reknitting as a society without slipping into the next cycle of violence. Because we know what happens. Again, Martin Luther King said it brilliantly. He said, hatred never stops hatred. Only love stops hatred. It's the only thing that's capable of doing it. This is not easy work. And it's not work that will let go of you easily either. Because once you start, you will end up like Nan and I, spending actually sometimes more of our time doing this than we do the work that we're paid for. And I guess I should say something about the nature of Mediators Beyond Borders. Here's what we are. We're a membership organization of mediators. We're a 501c3, so we're all tax exempt. Whatever donations you have, including your dues, are tax deductible. We have two orders of dues. One is $365 a year, which is to remind ourselves $1 a day that this is what it takes in order to change the world. And the second is $36.50. And we also have scholarships available for people who can't afford that, including this man who wrote to me from the